I went in with this mindset that I was done with the streets. Like even the day that the federal marshals put the handcuffs on me, like I felt like I was being like released from a lifestyle that I was ready to leave anyways.
Welcome to the Path Forward podcast. I'm sitting here today with Marlon Chamberlain. We are in Chicago, and we're going to have a conversation that's going to take about 30 minutes or so. But Marlon is going to bring some great insight. He's got a terrific story. And I have to tell you, we met right before the pandemic. In fact, when we tried to get together, we were having a hard time finding a restaurant that was open so we could sit down and talk. I saw him on Facebook and all the great things he was doing, and I reached out to him. And at that point, Second Opportunity was really just starting to get some momentum, and I wanted to be involved in some other things. And so he was great. He said, "Let's get together, let's talk." And I think that was kind of the beginning. We formed a friendship through that. We served on Fully Free, which is a campaign that he was in charge of, that he's going to talk about. We served on that together, and we've come to know each other. So I'm excited to have him here. I'm grateful that he's taken the time to be with us. And Marlon, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Good morning. Looking forward to it.
So what I'm going to ask you to start with is to talk about kind of your background, just, being from Chicago and those types of things.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago, lifelong Chicago resident. We moved around a lot, so I lived in a lot of different neighborhoods, which really sort of started some of like just like my challenges in terms of like how I got involved in the game and ended up in prison. But I mean, for the most part, I grew up with my father and my mother in the household. Grew up in church. Went to school. I did travel, and after high school, I went and moved to Clinton, Iowa, and this was really sort of the beginning of how I ended up in prison. But I went to Clinton, Iowa, to get away from Chicago, and to try to like go to school and start over. And unfortunately, I ended up in a situation where I was looking at 20 years in federal prison, and so my life changed drastically at that point because growing up, never did I imagine that I would be looking at 20 years in federal prison.
And so obviously you went through that process of being convicted or pleading out, and you went to prison. Where did you do your time when you were away?
So I did, I think, 7 years in Milan, Michigan, and then my last three and a half, I served at Yankton, South Dakota.
And there was something that changed that gave you some relief, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I must say that even going into the system with the 20-year sentence, I went in with this mindset that I was done with the streets. Like even the day that the federal marshals put the handcuffs on me, like I felt like I was being like released from a lifestyle that I was ready to leave anyway. So going into the system, I went in just like ready to do something different. And so I started programming, and really just setting goals for myself. Like I remember I set a goal to read one book a month and ended up reading over 100 books in 1 month because it was at that point, like I said, I was tired. I wanted to do something different. So I started just really investing in myself, like doing a lot of internal work and reflection around my lifestyle, the choices that I had made. And I made a decision that like I was not coming home the same. And then fortunately for me, in 2010, there was a federal law that changed called the Fair Sentencing Act, which changed the ratio between crack and cocaine. And because of this new law, my sentence was reduced from 20 to 14 years. And so I ended up serving over 10 and a half years in federal prison.
So I'd like to, well, you talk about, you have mentioned before that you put together, or you were involved in a group that every day would sit in front of the TV. And so would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a part of just like even my like journey and this change process started with me just like I became a sponge and just really wanting to learn. And so we formed this group while I was incarcerated called the Black Wall Street. And what we did is every day we would wake up at like 2:30 in the morning and we would watch the Asian markets close and watch the European markets open. But we studied the stock market every single day. So we would sit in front of CNBC and watch the TV and track multiple indexes for years. This is what we did.
So I'm going to throw a curveball here, but some of the men and women that are watching this, unfortunately, they're incarcerated in the county jail, and so they don't have access to a lot of resources. So, could you talk about some of the things you did, which was really things you were doing in your mind to prepare yourself? Things that somebody sitting in county jail that says, "I don't have access to a TV at 2:30 in the morning," or "I don't have the ability to get my hands on 100 books a month to read." So, what are some of the mental things that you did to get through your sentence, but also to prepare yourself for your release?
Yeah, so I would definitely say sitting in the county jail was definitely the worst part of this experience because there were a lot of unknowns. And so what I did was I did a lot of like just like meditation and prayer of really starting to like visualize myself as someone different or things that I wanted to do. I started to just meditate on some of like what does my life look like after my period of incarceration, or like what do I want to do as I go into the system. And so what I did was I started reading the Bible every day because that was a book that I had access to. So I would read a Proverbs and a Psalms every day, and then I would spend time meditating. And then I was able, my family was able to send me, like you said, I wasn't able to get access to over 100 books, but my family was able to send me like a book every couple months. And so I would read the book over and over and over until almost like I would almost memorize it. And then I would start trying to teach other like folks that were incarcerated with me in the county. I would start taking some of the lessons that I learned from the book and practice teaching other folks because I was told that if you can retain something and then teach somebody else, that helps you in terms of like you being able to retain information. So those were some of the things that I used. And also I played a lot of chess, which really takes your mind away from your circumstance and also allows you to start like really using your brain to figure out how to play and win chess.
Okay, so now the time comes that you've served your 10 and a half years. You return to Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay. So can we talk about your both the personal side and the professional side, how your life came together, what some of the challenges were, but what some of the victories were, and kind of walk us through, if you would, from that point
Mhm.
until today?
Yeah. So going back, like coming out the system, like I said before, like I went in with this mindset that I was not coming out the same, and so I really invested a lot of time and energy into my own leadership development. And so coming out the system, my interest was perked when the federal sort of the law changed. That perked my interest in policy work. And so I knew coming out that I wanted to get involved. And so from day one of me coming out the system, still sitting in the federal halfway house, I enrolled in school. um, I ended up finding a job with a friend of mine who I was incarcerated with, and I was able to start my own painting business. So I came out the system. I was a college student, started my own painting business where I was able to hire, I think, up to 10 people, all formerly incarcerated men and women. That were working for my company. We were able to work 7 days a week if we wanted to, and I ended up, alongside of me owning the business, I was also able to volunteer with an organization that helped me get involved in this work. And I didn't know at the time that I would be doing this work full time. It was just me saying that I wanted to volunteer and to get involved. But I was also one of the founding members of a coalition called the Rocky Coalition, which was an acronym for Restoring Rights and Opportunities Coalition of Illinois. And what we did was we started traveling down to Springfield and really going out in community and listening to community to hear what are some of the issues that are plaguing our communities in terms of opportunities. And from those conversations, we were able to develop a piece of policy that we then introduced to the legislator. And we traveled down to Springfield on many occasions talking to legislators about the importance of removing these barriers and creating opportunities. And we had a lot of great success. We passed, I think, in total, we passed over 15 bills through the legislator, which leads me to the work that I'm doing now. Because in that process, one of the things that we discovered was that if we continue to introduce one bill at a time to remove a barrier, that it would take us way too long, and we would be doing this work for the rest of our lives. And so we developed this concept of really using a wholesale approach to say, if we can identify all of the statutes that create these collateral consequences and then create a wholesale approach, that we could eliminate a number of statutes at one time. And so that is the work that I do now. I'm leading my own organization that is really focused on doing a lot of the community organizing work across the state. Also taking ownership of our narrative and telling our own stories. But then, like I said before, also introducing legislation to eliminate a number of these barriers. So as people transition out the system, that they're able to move forward and leave that period of their lives behind.
Would you explain some of the barriers that you've seen, some of the rules or regulations or laws that are in place that actually create additional problems and challenges for somebody who's releasing, just trying to get on the right path, and they can't do some of the more fundamental things?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are statutory barriers around housing, employment. So basically, these laws determine where you can live in terms of the city, and on most occasions, where you are allowed to live is one of the six communities where a lot of individuals go into and come out of the Department of Corrections, and these are communities that are under resources. There's also the sort of like the stigma that folks have to live with, and then you include all of these statutory barriers, so that creates a challenge. Then there's also statutes around employment that determine where you can work, and so these barriers really hinders individuals ability to really move forward in life and to climb out of poverty. And then there's also the just the random barriers. For an example, my father passed away 2 years ago and appointed me the executor over his estate. And I discovered because of a statute that I couldn't carry out my father's last wishes because there was a law in Illinois that prohibits anyone with the felony conviction from being the executor over an estate. There's also bills that determine that we can't run for municipal office, that we can't own a falconry bird or be on the premises of a bingo game. So there are hundreds of laws that really govern where a person can live, where they can work, where they can play, and really hinder that individuals like just ability to really move forward in life.
And so you've created now your own organization. The
Yeah.
name of that organization is?
The Illinois Coalition to End Permanent Punishments. For short, we say ENPP.org. But that is the new organization that now houses the Fully Free campaign and also the Clean Slate campaign.
And although your focus and your work, a lot of your work is in Illinois, you've expanded beyond Illinois, though, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're also talking to several different folks in different cities about replicating what we've started here in Illinois, because I mean, just the approach that we're taking in terms of having that research of every statute that creates a collateral consequence is useful. And we want to replicate this in other states. So we're talking to folks in Milwaukee, Atlanta, Michigan, and several states across the country. But I've also been able to really travel across the country and network and sharing some of our work, but also learning best practices from people all across the country. In fact, this summer I was just in Israel, a part of a fellowship with 30 community builders from all across the world. really being able to learn like what are some of the best practices in terms of how we engage our communities in this work to get folks involved.
Did you ever, in the dark and lonely days of being incarcerated, did you ever see that this would be the future, that you'd be traveling to Israel, leading organizations to help impact tens of thousands of people as they release from prison?
So not that part. I did see myself being successful because I knew like the routine that I had for myself while I was incarcerated. But I really saw myself really being more of an entrepreneur, investing in real estate, and also trading on the stock market. But like I said, like there's a lot of things that happened throughout my incarceration that when I look back now, I can see how I was being trained to do exactly what I'm doing now. So even though I didn't see it, I did see myself being successful beyond my incarceration, but just not in this work.
So we've talked about, or you've talked about your professional track, but you've had some milestones in your personal life too. Could you share some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So since I've been home, like I said before, I've started my own business, now started my own organization. I'm married, a homeowner. I'm still looking for entrepreneurship opportunities. So I'm still an entrepreneur. But my life has been great, like no complaints. The only challenges, like I've lost a lot of family members since I've been home, but I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had to spend with them, even like just beyond my incarceration. So it's been great.
I think so. As I go in and out of facilities, which is happening every week, some of what I hear is that there's too many barriers. There's no way to overcome this. I don't know where I'm going to get the emotional support. So, did you have you had any interactions with peer support groups and participated in any of those? And what have you seen come out of that?
Yeah, so my entire, well, not my entire, but a huge portion of my support network is all formerly incarcerated people. And so when we think about peer-to-peer support, like I have a lot of people on speed dial that I check in with on a regular. And then I'm also a part of like several just different groups where formerly incarcerated men and women come together really just to support each other and to check in to see how you doing, like, and not just like centered around the work, but just how I'm doing as an individual. How is my family life? How is the job work coming? So I'm also connected to a community. Like I said before, I lost a lot of my family. That was my initial support coming out the system. But I'm thankful for the support system that I have now, and which I call my new family, which is a lot of individuals who are on this same path that I'm on, which is that we're not going back to prison, but it's even beyond that. Like we really want to make change in our communities, and we want to have a huge role in that.
So, some of the things that I see related to people reintegrating is they've got the professional side to deal with, which creates a lot of challenges and things that have to be done. They're reestablishing relationships, maybe with family. Maybe they're in the situation where there's relationships they don't want to reestablish because it puts them back on a path that they don't want to be on. And so sometimes it feels, and this is personal experience, sometimes it feels overwhelming
Hmm.
when those challenges come up and it seems like there's too many different things to handle. Because when we're incarcerated, we're in such a routine.
Hmm.
You know, I like you, I stood up every day at 4 o'clock. I mean, no matter what.
Yeah.
And so we get in such a routine. But when all these things come at us, because the free world seems to move a lot faster than on the inside.
Hmm.
Do you have any advice or suggestions you could give as to how to deal with those types of challenges?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is prayer. That is my go-to in terms of when things seem overwhelming. There's a scripture that like I say on the regular, and it's Isaiah 26:3 that says, "Thou will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee." So when things are overwhelming for me, like that's the first place I go to. Second, I have a therapist that I check in with on a regular. And so when things are overwhelming, that is the second like 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 go-to person in terms of just being able to process what's happening, and then also like really creating a plan on how I'm going to address some of the things that are coming at me. And then three, I just think about um, how important I am, not just like to myself, but like to my family. And that also helps to like center me and to like focus on like really just trying to address like whatever the challenges may be. Just taking my time and really like living by this motto that I believe in progress and not perfection. And so as long as I'm working towards my goal and moving towards like whatever the challenges may be, I count it a win.
So, from the other side, having lived what you've lived, um, some of the people that are watching these different podcasts are family members of currently incarcerated people, and they love their loved one is incarcerated. They're waiting for them to come out, and they want to help, but they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
What would you tell family members about some things that they can do to be supportive and help people to reintegrate, especially those that have been on a sentence, say, longer than 5 years?
So I would definitely say like I would find out what they like in terms of subjects, and if it's a certain newspaper, I would try to get them a subscription to that newspaper, because then that becomes something that you can use to then have a conversation or a dialogue around. I would also find out like in terms of like what they like and order books, and also if you're able to read the same book, because then now that helps you have a dialogue with them to just make sure like that they're reading the books. But I would also just encourage them to think beyond their circumstance, and help them sort of think about what they want to do and some of the things that they could work on while they're inside. Like for me, like I said, like just from being out and all of the drug use prior to my incarceration, like it took me a while just to read a book. And so just being there to support them and encourage them, and sending them whatever information that they can use to better themselves. If you're able to visit them, that helps. If you're able to write them on the regular, or even just to send a card or something letting them know that you're thinking about them, like all of these things are important. But I would definitely encourage them to really write out a plan for themselves, and begin to think about goals and things that they want to do on the outside, and identify like things that they can do on the inside to really prepare themselves to meet those goals once they're out.
One of the things that continues to amaze me is that there's so many different opportunities for people that have been incarcerated. Unfortunately, the information doesn't get to the inside, to the people that really need to know. And so some of the courses that we do revolve around things like education.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can get Pell Grants while you're incarcerated, a wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But if those on the inside don't know about this,
Mm-hmm.
how can they take advantage? All these programs upon release that you can get into that are fully funded by departments of labor, if you want to get into welding or truck driving or computer coding and all these other things. And I guess I would just say to family members that when those things are available and your loved one on the inside has interest in them, if you can just get some information off the computer and send it into them so that their mind can be in a positive place, thinking
Absolutely.
about when this is over, I really would like to be involved in carpentry or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
because those programs are available. So before we I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was also going to say too, like because those are so the jobs that we do on the inside. Those are opportunities to really build and develop a skill, because you can also families can also send in information around how you can start your own construction company. So it could start with you simply learning carpentry, but then also being able to learn the business part of carpentry, and coming out and really starting your own construction company based on what you've learned from the inside. So absolutely, I would definitely encourage families, like I said, probe and really push them to learn what they want to learn more about, and then try to provide that information just to keep them mentally focused.
So as we wrap up here, and again, I'm grateful that you've taken the time to sit with us. And I think if you're watching this, you know why it was so important for me to get Marlon onto the podcast because wealth of information, but he's doing things that are changing lives, and it's great to be around people like that. But I'd like you to just talk to our audience, talk to both those that are incarcerated and their families, and maybe just share a little bit of wisdom or encouragement or whatever you feel is appropriate.
Yeah. So something happened to me that really changed my life while I was incarcerated, and that was I lost my mother on March 31st, 2006. Had a surprise visit from my auntie, basically sharing with me that my mother had passed away with a heart attack. And it was in that moment that I really made up my mind that like I wasn't going back to like the streets and hustling. And I would also say something else happened. Like the support that I received on the inside from the men really helped me get through that situation. And so what I would say is that there are a lot of good folks that are incarcerated that made a mistake. But that is not the end of your life. And you can begin to build and really evolve and change into the person that you want to be. But I will say it takes time, it takes investment, it takes sacrifice, it takes for you to do things different that may not be the norm of the institution where you are. I also there's a proverb that I live by that says, "He who associates with wise men will be wise himself." And so, even while I was incarcerated, I started associating with people that were on the same time as me, like people who were looking beyond the prison walls and thinking about who am I going to be when I go back home. I read books on parenting because I wanted to come home and be a better father to my children. I read books around marriage because I wanted to come home and get married and be a good husband. So, like, whatever the resources are that are available to you, like, especially depending on where you are, there are individuals there who have owned businesses or who have had unique careers that you can even just learn from them as you walk around the track. Or as you're standing in line for the child hall and you're talking to people, these are opportunities for you to really step outside of your comfort zone and build relationships with people who have been successful at some point in their lives. All of these are things that you can do while you're incarcerated. And what I would say to the family members of those that are incarcerated is continue to support your loved ones. As we mentioned, there are resources that I would definitely share with them just to keep them focused and knowing that there are programs and opportunities when people come out. But I would also just try to support them in terms of sending in information so that they can continue to just be prepared. But then also to the family members, there are organizations out on the outside that are doing great work that you can also connect to that may end up helping shorten or reducing the sentence of your loved one or others. So there are ways that the family members can also get involved to share that information and just sharing the stories of those of us that have transitioned out and are doing well. Like my life is not perfect. I do not want to give that impression, but one of the things that I love is just every day I have an opportunity to do better. And that was the motto that I lived with while I was incarcerated. That every day I just wanted to learn one new thing every day, whether it was something on TV, whether it was something through talking to someone, whether it was through reading a book or whatever it was. But my goal was to learn one new thing every day. And if you wake up with that mindset, you'll be shocked at who you become as you transition out, and also the work that you're able to get into.
Thank you, Marlon. There are people much smarter than me that are going to find a way to put Marlon's website and contact information at the bottom of the screen so that you can reach out to him. Your families that are seeing this, same thing. And we will absolutely have Marlon's story and a copy of this podcast and a link to his website on the Second Opportunity website. So we appreciate that you tuned in. We think, I know that it's a great story, and hopefully as you walk away from this, you're thinking about how you can enact into your daily routine some of the things that Marlon spoke about. So again, thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
And thank you for tuning in. This is the Path Forward podcast. My name is Augie, and I am your host. Thank you.
Peace and blessings.
Join me next time on the Path Forward podcast, where my guest is Willette Benford. She has an absolutely amazing story.